And let me tell you something. There are stories that are just stories, like the ones we tell each other for entertainment. And then there are stories that feel like they've been wired into the human psyche for thousands of years. This is one of those story of Prophet Ibrahim, known as Abraham in Christianity and Judaism, isn't just some old myth. It's foundational. This is one of those narratives that has shaped civilizations, ethics, even the way we think about loyalty and morality today. What really blows my mind about this story is how universal it is. You've got it in the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran. And yeah, they have slight variations, but the essence is the same. A man tested beyond anything we could imagine, asked to give up the thing he loves most. Now pause right there. Think about that. You've waited your entire life for something, you finally get it, and then you're told to give it up. Not for money, not because you screwed up, but because God said so. That's where my brain just starts firing questions like crazy. Why would a loving God put someone through that? What's the psychology behind faith at that level? And what does it teach us about life? This is the stuff I love talking about because it pushes you to the edge of what you think you know. Who was Ibrahim? So let's break it down. Abraham isn't just some random dude from history. This guy is like the spiritual forefather for billions of people. Muslims, Christians, Jews, they all look back to him. He's the common root. Which, by the way, is fascinating because if you think about all the religious tension in the world today, it's wild that these massive faith traditions trace back to one man who literally stood against an entire culture for what he believed was the truth. Now picture this. Ibrahim is born into a world full of idol worship. People back then didn't just casually believe in statues. These idols were like the center of life, politics, economy, culture, everything. And here's Ibrahim looking around like, wait a second, you guys are bowing down to rocks you made yourselves. This guy starts questioning everything. Imagine being that guy in your society. Everyone's like, dude, shut up and burn the incense. And he's like, nah, this doesn't make sense. I love that rebellious energy. That's punk rock for the ancient world. You're literally challenging the entire system. And he doesn't do it quietly either. There's a famous story where he smashes all the idols except the biggest one and then goes, ask the big guy what happened. That's savage. He's making a point. These things have no power. They can't protect themselves, let alone you. Now, why does this matter today? Because we still have idols. They just look different. Back then it was statues. Today it's money, fame, likes on Instagram. It's all the same psychology. People looking for something to worship, something to give meaning. Ibrahim was the guy saying, stop outsourcing your meaning to lifeless stuff. That's a lesson that still hits hard in the quest for truth. Here's where it gets even more interesting. Ibrahim wasn't just rebellious for the sake of being rebellious. He was on a legit quest for truth. There's this amazing passage in Islamic tradition where he looks at the stars, the moon and the sun, each time thinking, maybe this is God, but then he's like, nah, these things fade. The real God doesn't fade. Think about that mindset. It's so raw, so honest. He's not saying I already know everything. He's saying I'm searching. That resonates with me because honestly, isn't that what we're all doing? We're all out here trying to figure out what the hell this life means. And sometimes the answers aren't obvious. Ibrahim's journey shows that even prophets had to wrestle with doubt before they landed on faith. And here's a wild thought. How many of us are even willing to question like that? Most people just take whatever belief system they were born into and roll with it. But Ibrahim did. He risked everything, his reputation, his safety, because he wanted truth more than comfort. That's some next-level courage right there. Standing alone against the tide. So imagine being that guy who says, I think you're all wrong. What happens? People freak out. His own dad disowns him. The king at the time, Nimrod, basically tries to have him killed. There's this epic story where they throw him into a massive fire and God saves him. Now, whether you take that literally or metaphorically, the point stands. This guy stood so firm in his convictions that he was willing to die for them. And I gotta say, in a world where people flip out over losing followers, that level of conviction is almost alien. It makes me think, what do I actually believe so strongly that I'd put everything on the line for it? For most of us, the answer is not much. The big revelation, God speaks. Okay, so fast forward, Ibrahim proves his loyalty, and then he gets what I think is the ultimate human reward connection. God speaks to him. Now, whether you're religious or not, think about what that means symbolically. You've spent your life searching for truth, and then truth finds you. That's powerful. God tells him something radical. Leave your homeland, start fresh, and through you entire nations will come. That's a lot to process. Imagine you're just chilling, living your life, and suddenly you're tasked with being the patriarch of faith for billions. No pressure, right? But here's the kicker. Ibrahim and his wife can't have kids. They're old, like way past childbearing years. And yet God promises him a son. That's where faith really gets tested. Because it's easy to believe when things look possible. But when nature says no, and you still believe, that's next level faith. Finally a son, but then, so eventually he gets this miracle child, Ismail in the Islamic tradition, Isaac in the Judeo-Christian tradition. And now you'd think, okay, cool, happy ending. Nope, this is where the story gets wild. God tells Ibrahim, sacrifice your son. Pause. Just sit with that for a second. The thing you prayed for your entire life, the thing that represents hope, legacy, love, you have to give that up. And not because your son is sick or something. No, you have to kill him. With your own hand. Because God said so. Dude, my brain can't even compute that. Like, what do you even do with that? And that's where this story becomes more than a story. It becomes this deep meditation on obedience, trust, and what it means to surrender. Joe's brain breaks down the test. So let me throw this out there. If you're listening right now, ask yourself, could you do it? If you had a dream, a kid, a person you love more than life itself, and you're told to give it up, no explanation, no, here's why, just blind trust, what would you do? For me, I start spinning into all these philosophical rabbit holes. Like, is this about proving loyalty? Is it about killing your ego? Is it about saying, nothing, not even my deepest attachments, owns me, except God? Maybe it's all of that, and here's another thought. In modern terms, we all have our that thing we cling to so tightly we can't imagine life without it. Could be a career or relationship, money, status. The story of Ibrahim is basically asking, if you had to give that up for something bigger than yourself, would you? Different traditions, same core. Before we wrap up part 1, let's clear up something that always sparks debate. Who was the son? In the Bible, it's Isaac. In the Quran, it's Ismail. Scholars go back and forth on the details. But honestly, the core message doesn't change. The point isn't which son, it's the willingness to obey, even when the command seems impossible. And if you zoom out, you realize this story isn't just about religion. It's about human psychology. It's about confronting the limits of control and saying, I trust something bigger than me. All right, buckle up, because this is where the story goes from fascinating to absolutely insane. So Ibrahim finally has this miracle son, right? After years, decades of waiting. Imagine that. You've been wanting something your whole life. It's all you've prayed for. And then you finally get it. You're holding this kid in your arms, thinking, this is everything. And then God drops the biggest curveball in human history. Sacrifice him. Dude, I don't think our modern brains can even process that. It's so extreme that most people just dismiss it as myth because the reality of it is too heavy. But think about what this is saying on a symbolic and psychological level. This is about surrender, the ultimate surrender, not just giving up comfort, not just giving up money, but giving up the thing you love most. And Ibrahim doesn't hesitate. That blows my mind every time I think about it. According to Islamic tradition, he doesn't go, why? Are you sure? Can we renegotiate? No, man. He says, if this is what God wants, I'm in. That's a level of faith that is almost alien to us today. Now here's the part that really gets me. He doesn't just act alone. He tells his son, father-son conversation, the most intense dialogue in history. Picture this scene. Ibrahim goes to his son, who's old enough to understand what's going on. And he says something like, my son, I saw in a dream that I should sacrifice you. What do you think? That right there, that's next level parenting. He doesn't just drop it on him, he involves him. And the kid, this is where it gets wild, says, do what you're commanded, you'll find me patient. What? What kid says that? I've got kids, and if I said, hey buddy, we gotta do something intense, they'd be like, Dad, are you crazy? But this son, he's on board. That shows you something deep. It's not just about Ibrahim's faith, it's about the family's alignment. The son has that same surrender. That tells me this wasn't about violence or cruelty. It was about proving something on a spiritual level, that nothing comes before God. The walk to the sacrifice, imagine that walk. Just imagine it. You're walking with your son, and every step you take is a war. inside your head. Everything in you wants to protect him. Every instinct says turn back, and yet you keep going. That's the stuff of legends. Forget superhero movies, this is the most heroic act ever told. And here's a thought, how many of us could even take one step in that direction? I don't think I could. I'd rationalize, I'd negotiate, I'd do anything to avoid it. But Ibrahim just walks. That's faith in its rawest form. The moment on the mountain. So they reach the spot. Ibrahim ties his son down. Now let's pause. We have to talk about what this means psychologically because this is heavy. It's the ultimate clash between emotion and principle. Every fiber of his being must have been screaming, "Don't do this." But he raises the knife, and then this is where the story flips. God intervenes. Your voice says, "Stop. You've proven your loyalty." And there's a ram caught in the bushes. Ibrahim sacrifices that instead. Man, that twist gets me every time. It's like the universe saying, I didn't want the blood, I wanted the heart. It was never about killing the kid. It was about showing that nothing, not even the thing you love most, comes before the ultimate truth. What does it mean? Joe breaks it down. All right, so what do we do with this story today? Because unless you're living in some weird cult, nobody's asking you to sacrifice your kid. But the principle behind this, that's as relevant as ever. This is about letting go of attachment. Every single one of us has something we think we can't live without, our Ismail, so to speak. Maybe it's your career, maybe it's your relationship, maybe it's your image. And this story asks the hardest question. If you had to give that up for something bigger, could you? For me, that hits deep, because we all like to think we're strong, but when life rips something away from us, we fall apart. This story is like training for the ultimate test. Are you defined by your attachments, or do you have an anchor deeper than all that? Eid al-Adha, the living legacy. So here's the cool part. Muslims all over the world celebrate this story every year during Eid al-Adha, the festival of sacrifice. Millions of families sacrifice an animal, usually a sheep, goat, or cow, and share the meat with the... It's not about blood, it's about remembering the principle that nothing should come before God, and that gratitude means giving, not hoarding. And honestly, I think that's beautiful. Because in a world obsessed with taking, this is about giving. It's about humility, and it's about anchoring your life in something beyond your ego. Philosophy time, free will versus divine command. Okay, let's nerd out for a second because this story is basically the ultimate thought experiment in philosophy. Kierkegaard wrote a whole book about it, Fear and Trembling, and he calls it the teleological suspension of the ethical, which is a fancy way of saying sometimes to obey God you have to do something that looks insane to everyone else. That raises a huge question. What's more important, moral rules or divine command? Because by normal standards killing your kid is wrong. No debate there. But Ibrahim was willing because he trusted God's wisdom more than his own. That's a terrifying level of trust. And you know what? This connects to a bigger theme in life. We're all control. We want guarantees, plans, predictability. But life doesn't work that way. Sometimes you're asked to take leaps that make zero sense at the time. And maybe that's the real takeaway. Faith isn't about certainty. It's about moving forward even when everything in you wants to turn back. Modern lessons from an ancient story. So what can we learn from this in 20? Here's my take. Detach to grow. If you want to grow, you've got to be willing to let go. Not just the bad stuff, the good stuff too. That's brutal but true. Sacrifice of freedom. Sounds backward, but it's real. The less you're owned by your attachments, the freer you are. Ibrahim was the freest man alive because nothing owned him, except God. Test comfort. We live in a world addicted to comfort. But comfort never made anyone strong. Tests do. And the biggest tests aren't physical. They're spiritual and emotional. Joe's closing thoughts, man, this story wrecks me in the best way. It forces me to ask, what do I really worship? Because whether you're religious or not, you worship something. Could be money, success, health, relationships. And the question is, if life demanded you give that up, who would you be without it? For Ibrahim, the answer was clear. He'd still be a man of faith. And that's why this story echoes through history. It's not just about an ancient guy with a knife. It's about the human condition, about loyalty, about what we hold on to when everything else falls away. Final mic drop. So yeah, the story of Ibrahim and the ultimate sacrifice. It's not just religion. It's philosophy, it's psychology, it's life. And if you really sit with it, it'll mess you up in a good way. Because it'll make you ask questions most people spend their whole lives avoiding.